Welcome back. You're with us here on Newsroom. Joining us on the show now, Adi Godrej, the new president of CII. Mr. Godrej, a very good afternoon and congratulations on taking over as the head of CII. You know, really wanted to get a sense from you to start off with. You've taken over at a time when we've just seen the RBI provide some amount of necessary stimulus to industry, at least in terms of sentiment, by that 50 basis point rate cut. What is your outlook going ahead when it comes to a revival of demand, of investments, of expansion going ahead in the industry?
Well, for its theme this year, CII has chosen revival of growth through reform and governance. And of course, the RBI move the day before yesterday is very welcome. After having raised interest rates several times in the last few years, RBI has reduced the repo rate. I think that's very welcome. The 50 basis point reduction is very welcome. We do hope it is followed by further rate reductions over this calendar year. And I think that will certainly give a strong boost to growth, which is very badly needed in our country. And we do hope that the reform process also takes shape going forward. And if we can make improvements in governance, that will give a further boost to growth.
Right. I'll come back to the governance issues in a moment, Mr. Godrej, but when you talk about boosting growth, what are some of your key concerns? The RBI at least saying that they do see global uncertainty as somewhat having eased, at least for now. You know, the currency, for instance, has been playing havoc. We're still seeing oil prices looming large. What, according to you, would be the key concerns for industry going ahead?
I think the most important thing is we need to revive growth. And some of the reforms, for example, the goods and services tax could add tremendously to the revival of growth. Implementation of the GST could solve some of our macroeconomic issues. Clearly, inflation is a concern. Global commodity prices have been mostly responsible for inflation. There are several problem areas on the horizon, but CII hopes to work with the central government, with the state governments, with the opposition parties, to see that there's a strong consensus on reviving growth.
Are you also troubled by those fiscal deficit figures, Mr. Godrej? Do you feel that when you're talking about reforms and a push going ahead, what more do you feel needs to be seen, you know, from the capital, from the government, in terms of putting in place, you know, some key rules going ahead?
No, there are several factors that have to be taken into account. Fiscal deficit is one of them. Inflation is also an important issue. Some of the effects of inflation are coming from global considerations, global commodity prices. Supply chain deficiencies are also causing inflation. And I think corrections in the supply chain can help contain inflation. I think we need to work on all these fronts. And CII, through its very wide network in the country, would like to coordinate these efforts between the state governments, central governments, and even the opposition parties.
Must ask you also about GAR, Mr. Godrej. As you know, there was a lot of feedback that came in, or a lot of voices of sounding concern about that retrospective amendment made in the finance bill, or suggested in the finance bill. We're seeing reactions now pouring in, even in international media. We've heard Geithner talking about it. There's a lot of concern. Vodafone, of course, has gone out now and specifically, put out a notice expressing its displeasure with that move. What is the industry's view when it comes to this critical issue? Because in terms of how it's affecting foreign sentiment, it's really not, it's really put a dampener on that front.
CII feel that these retrospective amendments have created a very negative perception, and not just internationally, but also within the country. That will certainly affect investment, that will affect sentiment, and we feel that these retrospective amendments should not be implemented. We think, particularly at this point of time, the negative sentiment they are likely to create would go against the growth program we wish the country to go forward with.
All right, so that is a critical factor, of course, that we'll be watching out for. Just finally, Mr. Godrej, also to get a sense from you, you've been very active when it comes to, proper or adequate corporate governance and sort of making sure that's implemented across your own companies as well as far as possible in the industry. What more is CII planning to do in that space?
I think not just corporate governance, but governance in general is very important. CII was the first institution to institute voluntary corporate governance guidelines as far back as 1998. CII has worked very strongly on the corporate governance front. We have also worked strongly on the governance front. We formed a task force more than a year ago, which has provided a code of ethics for our members, which the members in turn can circulate amongst their employees. We are very clear that if corporate governance and general governance standards in India improve, it could add considerably to GDP growth going forward. And we need to make these changes as we go forward.
Mr. Godrej, thank you so much for joining us. Wish you all the best in your new post. And of course,
good talking to you, Ava.
Thank you. Hoping to see a lot more of you. Thanks so much. A quick look at the markets also today.